In this video, we will take a look at events that happened in Malaysia in 2003. 28-year-old Canny Ong disappeared from the parking lot of a metropolitan mall where she had dinner with people close to her. Her family filed a disappearance report to the police, and soon the authorities made a shocking discovery. The story of Canny Ong still lives in the memory of many Malaysians. This tragedy has shaken the country, not only because of its terrible and nonsensical nature, but also because it happened in a popular and prestigious mall equipped with surveillance cameras. Canny Ong Lay Kian was born in Malaysia on July 18, 1974. She was the younger of two daughters and had a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Canny went to the USA to get an education and try to build a career in the field of information technology. Living in the United States, she met a guy named Brandon. He was a US citizen and an ethnic Chinese, whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Canny and Brandon were friends at first, but soon their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a really close person to Canny. He tried to support her in everything and help her. In 2001, the couple got married. Canny had everything she dreamed about in terms of both her career and personal life. In 2003, she worked as an analyst in San Diego, was building plans for the future together with her husband, and wanted to become a mother. But that year, a sequence of certain events ultimately resulted in horrible events happening. In 2003, Canny's father, Ong Jung, was diagnosed with cancer, and she made a decision to return to Malaysia to visit him and help her family through this ordeal. On June 1, 2003, Canny landed in Malaysia with Brandon. Brandon returned to the USA in a couple of days, and Canny stayed in Kuala Lumpur and devoted most of her time to caring for her father, who was being treated at one of the clinics in the capital. Every day, she talked with Brandon on the phone for hours on end. They talked about everything, including their two cats, and she reproached him for overfeeding them. It almost sounded like they were talking about their children. Canny's father had his kidney removed, but luckily, his health was getting better. He was recovering. That's why, on June 14, 2003, Canny planned to return to the USA. The day before the flight, she invited her mother Pearlie, sister Elsie, and close friends to a farewell dinner at the restaurant located in one of the popular malls. That evening, on June 13, 2003, Canny and her mother arrived at the designated place later than others. Being unable to find a parking spot on the street in front of the mall, Canny had to drive inside the underground parking lot, which was not free. But it wasn't the fee that Canny's mother worried about, but the fact that the parking lot was poorly lit. Having left the car, they got up to the second floor, where the restaurant was located. Canny was happy to see her childhood friends. She hadn't seen some of them for a very long time, and they had a lot to talk about. In a few hours, she started noticing that Pearlie looked tired. She asked the mother if she wanted to go home, to which Pearlie replied that she had a very busy day and didn't mind leaving. Telling her friends that she will be back soon, Canny got up from the table with her mother and her sister Elsie. The three of them went to the machine to pay for parking. The payment terminal was located on the first floor of the mall, and the parking, as I said, was underground. Standing in the queue for the terminal, Canny realized that she had left a parking ticket in the car. She told her sister and mother to stay in line and went down to get the ticket. The terminal queue was gone, but Canny still hasn't come back. 10 more minutes passed, and her sister started calling her. The first call remained unanswered, and the second one was redirected to a voicemail. Something was clearly wrong. Elsie and Pearlie immediately headed to the parking lot, where, to their surprise, they found out that Canny's car was no longer there. They went around the parking lot several times, after which they were absolutely sure that Canny disappeared along with the car. Pearlie was sure that something had happened with her daughter, as Canny wouldn't drive off without saying anything. The parking lot had poor lighting, but there were surveillance cameras that could provide some answers. The mall security didn't want to show the footage to Canny's relatives at first, but gave in after her mother's pleas for help. Around midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the footage that shocked them and confirmed their worst fears. The footage showed Canny's car exiting the underground parking lot at high speed and breaking the barrier, and somebody else was driving it. The footage quality was not good, but it was clear that the person in the driver's seat was probably a man, and Canny was sitting next to him in the passenger seat. And her body position was as if she were tucked against the door, trying to keep herself as far as possible from the driver. After seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately went to a police station, where she filed a disappearance and kidnapping report on her daughter. The police began the investigation, and Canny's family and friends were driving all around Kuala Lumpur, desperately hoping to spot her car, a purple Proton Tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Canny's husband, started to realize that something was wrong. He dialed the wife's number many times but wasn't able to reach her. He dialed her mother, from whom he learned about what happened. The disappearance of Canny shocked Brandon. Pearlie heard how he was crying on the phone. Only at dawn did Canny's friends and relatives go to their homes. Sadly, their search was unsuccessful. The police were spreading information about the disappearance and conducting their own search, which also didn't bring any hope. Footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was kidnapped didn't help in identifying the man who was driving the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Canny's loved ones have last seen her. It was obvious to the authorities that if Canny Ong was indeed kidnapped, it was not for ransom, as if money were the motive, the kidnapper would have come forward a long time ago and demanded ransom. And this state of affairs did not bode well, which was confirmed that same day. The police made a sinister discovery. Canny's car was left on one of the city streets. The front right tire was in such a condition that it is safe to say that the car had been driven with a flat tire for a while, as a result of which it was literally ripped to pieces. In the back of the car at the passenger seat, there was a red stain, a large one at that. Forensic experts took scrapings from the back seat and fingerprints from the steering wheel, as well as other parts of the car. There was a lot of evidence in the car. I will talk about it more later. Canny's family and friends didn't lose hope, and were praying that she would return to them safely. But sadly, the next day after the car was found, all their hopes were crushed. On June 17th, a road worker caught a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near a highway. When he lifted the lid, he saw a body that someone was trying to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived on the scene. 2 car tires filled with concrete that were once used as stands for road signs were lying on top of the body. Whoever hid it there was trying to make it harder to identify it. The family's worst fears could be confirmed after the body was found, but Pearlie said that she won't believe that her daughter is dead until she gets confirmation. "Until they do so, we will continue to hope she will turn up alive," she said. The family headed to the morgue, but the doctors said that they still couldn't confirm that this was Canny Ong's. Family members had samples of their DNA taken to conduct a comparative analysis. The results of expertise made Canny's parents' worst nightmare come true. The found body is indeed that of their daughter. Some sources claim that even before the DNA test results, Canny's family identified the jewelry on the body, but as a loving mother, Pearlie believed and hoped that her daughter was alive until the end. It is hard to imagine what emotional torture she had to go through. The autopsy revealed that Canny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen. A medical forensics expert has also found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around Canny's neck in several knots. In addition, semen was found inside her body, serving as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, there was an event that raised many questions regarding the work of law enforcement agencies. A policeman working undercover by the name of Subramaniam Ravichandran reported to his superiors that on the night of Canny's disappearance, he was on duty on his motorcycle along with his partner, patrolling the streets of a nighttime Kuala Lumpur. Both he and his partner were dressed in civilian clothes. They saw a car parked at the wrong spot, taking up half of the road, and decided to stop near it to see if anyone was inside. Walking up to the driver's door, Ravichandran saw a man sitting behind the wheel and a woman next to him on the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man behind the wheel lowered it a third of the way down, he showed him his police ID and asked him what he was doing there, to which the driver replied that he's just sitting there and chatting with his girlfriend and is not doing anything illegal. After these words, the policeman asked to check both the driver's and his companion's IDs. While the man behind the wheel was handing out the documents, the woman in the passenger seat gave strange signals with her hands. It seemed as if she was asking for help. Every time her assumed boyfriend turned his head toward her, she stopped. Having noticed that, the officer asked the driver to step out of the car. The driver responded aggressively, telling Ravichandran that he was not a police officer, but a thief. After these words, he raised the window and reached for the key in the ignition. Realizing that the car would drive off, the policeman took out a pistol and shot the right front wheel, after which the car drove off at a high speed. Ravichandran, together with his partner, began a motorcycle chase, but for some reason they couldn't catch up to a car with a flat tire. This is the official version. The state of affairs in the Malaysian police at the time was such that it came as no surprise that the officer on duty did not call reinforcements and did not notify anybody about what happened. That car with a flat tire was the purple Proton Tiara, the transport of Canny Ong, that will be found abandoned in a few days. And even though the chase did not end in favor of the police, now they had documents given by the driver. The man in the car was 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, and the woman was Canny Ong. And if the officer in that situation behaved differently, then maybe Canny would be alive. But sadly, Ravichandran notified his higher-ups about this situation only after Canny's body was found. The only good thing that happened that night was probably that the officer had documents on the suspect. Besides Canny's family, many Malaysians came to say goodbye to her. For Brandon, the death of his beloved wife was an irreparable loss. Meanwhile, the police began their search for Ahmad Najib. As it turned out, he never lived at the address listed in his documents. But his name was real, which meant there were many ways to find him. The police began searching for the name listed in the documents in the Registry of Documented Marriages and in the National Agency of Social Support. A match was found. Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and grew up in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 brothers and sisters in the family. Since he had to work and help the family, he dropped out of school. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur. Later, he got married and became the father of 2 children. Since 2000, he has worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of his wife and her place of work, the police began surveilling her. She worked in one of the metropolitan banks. Waiting until her shift was over, police officers, disguised in civilian clothes, followed her and found out her home address. Now the police knew where Ahmad lived, but to not scare him, they had to make sure that he was inside the house. For 3 days they watched the house, but the suspect did not appear once. The investigators began to doubt that Ahmad Najib still lives with his family, but these were hasty conclusions. On the 4th day of surveillance, around 4 a.m., they saw a cab pull up to the house, out of which Ahmad Najib got out. Just a minute later, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. Information about the arrest and identity of the suspect quickly leaked into the press. Many who knew Ahmad Najib couldn't believe that he was the one who kidnapped and took the life of Canny Ong. He was a loyal husband, a caring father of 2 children, and generally gave the impression of a good man. But soon, officers were sure that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Najib was completely calm and stated during the first interrogation that he is only willing to talk with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. He started denying his guilt. Only as he was presented with evidence connecting him with Canny Ong did his confidence start gradually fading. At first, he was shown 2 IDs that he gave to the officer on duty on the night of the kidnapping of Canny. Then officers said that they found blood spots on his jacket and jeans, and that the DNA analysis will almost certainly show that this is the blood of Canny Ong. Only after Najib realized that the officers were not bluffing and that they had irrefutable proof did he confess that he kidnapped and took Canny's life. In 10 days from the moment of kidnapping, On June 23, 2003, Ahmad was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. During the next few days, the police conducted an investigatory experiment during which Najib showed all the places where he was with Canny, and explained in detail how and how many times he forced her into getting intimate with him, as well as how he took her life and how he tried to get rid of her body. In all places where Najib led the police, they found evidence confirming his words. At the underground parking lot where it all began, the cameras captured Ahmad Najib. According to him, he was waiting for his former boss, who fired him and whom he wanted to get revenge on. It is worth noting that the version about the former boss was not confirmed. By hiding in the darkness, he saw how Canny was looking for something in her car and decided to take advantage of it. He shoved her in the car and threatened her, telling her that if she tried to escape or call for help, she would regret it. Canny fell into a stupor and obediently complied with all his commands. Then he sat in the driver's seat and drove out of the parking lot at a high speed, breaking the barrier. Having stopped in an industrial area, he started harassing Canny, but right at that moment, a police officer in civilian clothes pulled up to the car. Najib was trying to convince the officers that he only realized that he kidnapped the wrong woman when the officer asked to check their IDs. Even if we assume that he did intend to kidnap his former boss, it still doesn't make him any less guilty, as, without a doubt, she would have suffered the same fate as Canny Ong. According to his words, Najib managed to escape the pursuit, and even though the officer had his documents, he didn't think to let Canny go. He stopped the car on the streets to replace a tire that had been punctured by a bullet. A car with a woman inside was parked near the place where he stopped. He walked over to her and asked for a jack. He wanted to change the tire, but then saw that Canny was signaling the woman with her hands, who landed him the jack, so he gave up on the idea of changing the tire and drove off right away. A bit later, he stopped at a deserted place and, threatening Canny with a knife, forced her to get intimate with him. Then he drove to another district, where he forced Canny to satisfy him once again. Both of them were in the back seat, and Canny was begging him for mercy, but instead, he took her life. Then he hid her body in a manhole near a highway, drove a car to another place, and left it there. 16 hours had passed before he returned to that place with a gasoline canister and tried to cover up the evidence of the crime. A DNA expertise confirmed that the semen found inside Canny Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also found in the car, as were his fingerprints, which was another irrefutable proof of his guilt. The expertise also determined that the blood found on his jacket and jeans was that of Canny Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, just 3 months after the death of Canny. This case became one of the most controversial in Malaysia, and it has received a great deal of attention from the media and the public. Such a high-profile trial has not only attracted ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also those who, in my opinion, decided to make a name for themselves, namely attorneys, of whom Najib had no shortage. Even though he admitted his guilt during the investigation, and there was more than enough proof of his crimes, including the DNA evidence, after consulting with 6 of his attorneys, Najib did not plead guilty at his first trial, stating to the court that he confessed under police pressure. But the judge, before whom Najib confessed right after his arrest, testified that at the time of confession there were no signs of physical abuse on the defendant and that he behaved in a calm and relaxed manner. With that in mind, the attorneys changed the tactic and began to argue that Canny was in the car with their client at her own will. Attorneys attributed it to the fact that Canny, having a black belt in Taekwondo, didn't try to escape. This attempt to put blame on the victim for not escaping was rejected, as everyone has a different response to critical situations. But they didn't stop there. Then they came up with a new version, stating that Canny got intimate with Ahmad Najib voluntarily, saying that Canny died from strangulation, which was practiced to spice up the sensations during the intercourse, but this version was challenged and denied by forensics experts. The cloth on Canny's neck was tied in several knots, which indicate that Najib had no intention of loosening it. In fact, the cloth was tied so tight that the skin underneath it was the only spot on the body not damaged by the fire. But that's not all. The cloth was designed for wiping windows on a plane, and considering that the defendant worked as a cabin cleaner, this connected him even more with the crime. Not to mention the fact that the lawyers didn't know how to explain the stab wounds on Canny's body. At that point, Najib's attorneys ran out of ideas and recommended that he just keep quiet and not give any testimony. Many were questioning why Canny didn't get out of the car when she had at least 2 opportunities to do so. Sadly, we will never get to know the answer. Maybe she simply froze out of fear and couldn't run away. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was found guilty on all charges. The judge said that the gathered evidence points to only one person. For committing the crime against the sexual integrity of Canny Ong, Najib was given the highest sentence according to Malaysian laws, 20 years in prison and 10 cane strikes. But he was also sentenced to death for taking her life. Those who frequently watch these kinds of videos about real crimes know that, for example, in the USA, criminals are executed with a lethal injection. However, in Malaysia, this process is very different. They do not use expensive drugs, but ropes, which are much cheaper. Ahmad Najib's attorneys made 2 attempts to appeal the sentence, but both of them failed. In 2010, Najib wrote to the head of the state with a request to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment. In his letter, he pleaded not guilty once again, but his clemency request was denied. On September 23, 2016, more than 13 years after Canny Ong's death, the sentence of 40-year-old Ahmad Najib was carried out.